Karen called my daughter a brat in the store, didn't know she was autistic. It had been a long day already, the kind of day where you're just counting down the hours until bedtime and hoping nothing else goes wrong. Work had drained me, the traffic was heavier than usual, and my daughter Lily had a bit of a rough morning getting ready for school. She's 9, bright and curious with the most incredible singing voice I've ever heard, even if it's usually only a soft hum under her breath. Lily is autistic. Something we don't keep secret but also don't feel the need to explain to everyone we pass by in public. She doesn't like loud sounds or sudden changes, and humming helps her feel safe. It's not loud or disruptive, just a gentle melody she lets out like her own personal security blanket. When she was younger, I used to worry about how people would react to her differences, but over the years, I've learned to tune out the occasional stares or whispers. Lily's happiness and comfort come first. That afternoon, we stopped by the grocery store on the way home to pick up a few essentials: milk, some snacks for Lily's lunchbox, and the ingredients for her favorite macaroni bake. She was in a good mood for once, a bounce in her step as she clutched her little plush bunny in one hand and the grocery basket in the other. She started humming almost immediately after we walked through the automatic doors, a soft, tuneful stream of notes that floated through the air like she was scoring her own little movie. I smiled at her and gently placed my hand on her head, giving her hair a quick ruffle. She beamed at me and kept on humming as we walked through the produce aisle. We hadn't even been in the store 5 minutes when I noticed her. The woman was standing by the bananas, wearing an oversized pair of sunglasses indoors and holding a tiny designer purse like it was some kind of sacred object. She looked like the kind of person who never left the house without applying a full face of makeup, even just to go to the corner shop. At first I didn't think much of her, just another shopper, but the way she glanced at Lily, her face scrunching up like she just stepped in something foul, caught my attention. I tried to ignore it. People have their reactions. I can't control them, and usually they just move along. But this woman didn't move along. She followed us for a bit, which I found odd but chalked up to coincidence. Maybe she needed something in the same aisle, I told myself. But every time Lily began to hum just a little louder, usually when she saw something she liked or when I paused too long to compare prices, the woman seemed to flinch like someone had jabbed her with a stick. And then she did the thing that always raises red flags in my mind. She began to mutter. At first it was under her breath, but loud enough for me to hear snippets. Parents these days, and no discipline. And some people shouldn't even have kids. I tensed up, my gut telling me this wasn't going to end quietly. I looked down at Lily, who was completely oblivious, still humming away as she compared 2 boxes of cereal like she was choosing between life paths. I gave her space to decide and turned slightly toward the woman, hoping maybe a quick glance would get her to back off. It didn't. Instead, she marched up with an air of entitlement that could have knocked over a whole shelf of soup cans and planted herself directly beside us, arms folded, lips curled in a sneer. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice sharp and full of that condescending tone I've heard too many times before, "but do you think you could control your child?" I blinked at her, thrown off for a second by how direct she was. "I'm sorry." "She's making that awful noise. It's giving me a headache," the woman snapped again, waving her manicured hand in the air as though Lily's humming were some kind of toxic gas cloud. "If she wants to sing, she should do it at home. This is a public place." I opened my mouth, stunned into silence for a beat, and then closed it again. I wanted to stay calm for Lily's sake, but my patience was already worn thin from the day and I could feel the heat rising in my chest. "She's not singing. She's humming quietly. It helps her stay calm. She's autistic." The woman rolled her eyes in a way that told me she had already made up her mind and didn't care what I had to say. "Oh, please, don't give me that excuse. I'm so tired of people blaming every little behavior on autism just so they don't have to parent their kids. If she can't act normal, maybe she shouldn't be out in public." The words hit me like a slap. For a second, all I could do was stare at her. My jaw clenched, my fists balled at my sides. I turned toward Lily, who had stopped humming and was now looking up at me, sensing the tension even if she didn't fully understand what was being said. Her little plush bunny dangled from one hand, and she blinked up at me, her big eyes worried. I knelt down to her level, forcing myself to smile, even though my throat felt tight. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked softly. She nodded, but her voice was quiet. "Am I being bad?" "No, baby. You're doing great," I whispered, brushing her hair behind her ear. I stood up and turned back to the woman. "You don't know us. You don't know what my daughter deals with. And if a child quietly humming is enough to ruin your shopping trip, maybe you shouldn't be in public." The woman scoffed, pulling her sunglasses down and narrowing her eyes at me like she couldn't believe I had dared speak back. "You're one of those parents, entitled, always expecting the world to cater to your little snowflake." Before I could respond, a voice interrupted, calm but firm. "Is there a problem here?" A store employee, a young man with a name tag that read James, had approached from the end of the aisle. His eyes shifted from the woman to me, and then down to Lily, who had started humming again softly, her bunny now clutched tight against her chest. The woman immediately jumped in, her voice turning sweet and wounded like a switch had flipped. "Yes, actually. This woman's child is being disruptive and loud and making the shopping experience very uncomfortable." James looked at me, then at Lily and back to the woman. He didn't look convinced. "I've been nearby for a few minutes. All I heard was a child humming quietly. That's hardly disruptive." The woman's face flushed. "I demand to speak to a manager." James nodded politely. "Of course, I'll go get them right now." He turned to me. "Would you mind waiting here a moment?" I nodded. Lily was still humming, and I could tell she was trying hard not to melt down. I stroked her back gently as James walked off. The woman huffed loudly and muttered under her breath again, "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable." And there we stood in the middle of the cereal aisle. Me, my beautiful humming daughter, and a woman who had no idea that her entitled outburst was about to backfire in a way she'd never forget. Lily clung to my hand a little tighter as we stood there waiting for the manager, her humming now more subdued, each note drawn out and quieter, like she wasn't sure anymore if it was safe. I could feel her anxiety creeping in, not quite a meltdown but teetering on the edge, and all I wanted in that moment was to protect her from the judgmental stares and harsh whispers that had begun circling like vultures. I crouched down to meet her eyes, trying to anchor her the way I always did. I told her she was okay, that she wasn't in trouble, that we were just going to finish shopping soon and everything would be all right. She nodded softly but didn't say anything, which told me she was processing more than she could express. Behind us, the woman, the cairn, as people like to call them online, was tapping her foot like we were the ones inconveniencing her. She was grumbling louder now, talking to no one and everyone at once, projecting her grievances into the air like they were gospel. "Ridiculous," she said. "Absolutely disgraceful. Parents these days let their kids run wild and then make excuses. You can't say anything anymore without someone pulling out the autism card. What's next? Barking in the aisles because their pet has anxiety." Her voice had that shrill, performative tone that demanded attention, the kind that hoped someone would step in and agree with her, but all she got were uncomfortable glances and the subtle shuffle of customers moving away. A few moments later, James returned with a woman in her 40s who wore a store badge that read Manager Ellen. She carried herself with the kind of poised professionalism that told me this wasn't her first time dealing with a public spectacle. She scanned the situation with one sweep of her eyes, me crouched beside Lily, the cairn with her arms crossed and face locked into a scowl, and James standing awkwardly to the side like a referee between rounds. Ellen smiled warmly at me first and spoke with a measured tone. "Hi there, I understand there was a problem." I stood up, gently squeezing Lily's hand, and said, "Yes, there was. This woman approached us and began yelling at my daughter for humming. I tried to explain that she's autistic and the humming is a coping mechanism for her. She didn't care. She called her a brat and said we shouldn't be in public." Karen jumped in, her voice sharp. I didn't yell. I asked her to control her child. That noise, whatever it was distracting and rude. I'm a customer too, and I have a right to shop in peace without being assaulted by noise. Ellen's expression didn't change, but her tone shifted slightly, just enough to signal she wasn't buying into the woman's dramatics. I see. James, did you hear any of this? James nodded carefully. Yes, I was down the aisle when I heard raised voices. When I came over, the child was humming softly. That's all I heard, nothing disruptive. Karen scoffed. So now I'm being ganged up on. I see how it is. You're all too scared to speak up because of political correctness. Ellen remained calm, even as the tension continued to build. She looked at Lily, then back at me. I'm really sorry this happened, she said gently. You're absolutely welcome here, and your daughter is not causing any problem. Then, turning to Karen, her voice grew firmer. We have a responsibility to make this store accessible and comfortable for all our customers. That includes people with disabilities. We don't tolerate discrimination or harassment. Karen's jaw dropped, and for a second she looked stunned that someone had dared push back. Then, with a high-pitched laugh, she barked, So now I'm the one being accused of harassment. Are you serious right now? That little girl was making noise, and frankly, it was annoying. You can't kick me out for that. Ellen didn't flinch. Actually, I can. We have the right to refuse service to anyone who violates our code of conduct. Harassing another customer, especially a child, over a disability falls squarely under that. She pulled a notepad from her pocket and began writing something down. I'll be reporting this incident. We have security footage as well, so everything can be reviewed. Karen's face turned red, her voice rising. You have got to be kidding me. This is outrageous. I've shopped here for years. I spend hundreds of dollars here every month. And we appreciate our regular customers, Ellen said, still calm but unyielding. But no customer is above our policy on respectful conduct. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store now. If you refuse, I'll have to involve security. Karen's mouth flapped open and closed again like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. I half expected her to throw herself to the floor or start screaming. For a moment, she just stood there, her eyes darting around for support that wasn't coming. The other customers in the aisle were quiet now, watching the scene like a slow-motion car crash. And finally, with a dramatic huff, she turned on her heel and stormed off, muttering to herself about lawsuits and reviews and how this would all be on Yelp. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Ellen turned back to us with a softer smile now. I really am sorry about all of that. You shouldn't have had to go through that just trying to shop. Thank you, I said, my voice still a bit tight. It happens more often than I'd like to admit, but today was especially ugly. She nodded, glancing down at Lily. Is she okay? She will be, I said, brushing my fingers gently along Lily's arm. It's hard when things like this happen, but she's strong. I'd like to offer you a gift card as an apology, Ellen said. I know it doesn't make up for it, but it's the least we can do. I hesitated for a moment, surprised, and then nodded. That's very kind of you, thank you. As Ellen stepped away to go grab the card, Lily looked up at me again, her eyes still wide but calm now. She whispered, Did I do something wrong? No, sweetie, I said, kneeling again to hold her close. You didn't do anything wrong, you were just being you, and that's more than enough. I stayed like that for a few minutes, holding her tightly, trying to reassure her and myself that this world still had people in it willing to stand up when it mattered. That there were still strangers who wouldn't just watch and whisper, but actually do something when someone else was being hurt. As we waited for Ellen to return, I glanced down the aisle again, now quiet and ordinary as though none of the chaos had happened. But something had shifted, not just for Lily, not just for me, but for everyone who saw it. Because sometimes standing up for someone doesn't look like a grand speech or a dramatic moment. It looks like calmly, firmly telling someone like Karen, enough. Ellen returned a few minutes later, holding out a small envelope containing the gift card she'd mentioned. And although the gesture was simple, It felt like something significant in that moment, not because of the money, but because someone in authority had actually cared enough to do something. I thanked her quietly, and she crouched down next to Lily with a gentle smile, keeping her voice soft and soothing. She complimented Lily's bunny plush and even asked if she had a favorite snack they could find together. Lily didn't say anything right away, but she gave a tiny smile and pointed toward the cookies, and Ellen nodded like it was the best answer in the world. It was such a stark contrast to the scene that had just unfolded, and I could feel the tension finally beginning to release from my shoulders. For once, someone hadn't demanded we justify ourselves, hadn't acted like Lily's presence was a burden. Instead, they treated her like what she was, a child worthy of dignity and patience. As we walked together toward the front of the store, I could feel curious eyes still watching us from a few aisles away. Some people pretended to browse but kept glancing over, their expressions mixed, some sympathetic, others uncertain, and maybe one or two wearing the same judgmental look Karen had worn. But none of them said anything, and that was fine. I didn't need an audience. I just needed to get Lily home. Still, it struck me how quickly a single moment could transform a mundane trip into something that left a mark, not just on me, but on Lily, who was old enough now to sense when the world wasn't kind, even if she didn't always have the words to explain it. We made our way to the checkout, Ellen insisting we skip the line and gesturing to an empty register where another employee was already waiting. I started unloading our items onto the belt, keeping one hand on Lily's shoulder as she stood close beside me. Her humming had resumed, a little less steady this time, like her confidence had been shaken, but I was grateful it hadn't disappeared completely. It was her way of processing, of finding her balance again, and I wasn't about to stop her. The cashier didn't say much, but she smiled at Lily and scanned our items carefully, even taking the time to double-bag the milk and fragile items without being asked. It was a small thing, but when you spend enough time navigating a world that doesn't always make space for your child, those small kindnesses mean everything. As we finished checking out, Ellen handed over the receipt and the gift card, again apologizing for what had happened. She looked genuinely regretful, not just like she was doing her job, and I could tell this wasn't something she saw every day. "If you ever have any issues in the future," she said quietly, "just come find me or ask for management. We want this to be a safe place for your family, okay?" I nodded, unable to express how much that meant to hear. I wanted to say more, something heartfelt about how rare it was for someone to take a stand in real time instead of just offering support after the fact. But the words got caught somewhere in my chest, and all I managed was a quiet "thank you" as I took Lily's hand again and started walking toward the doors. The air outside was cool and crisp, the sun beginning to dip low in the sky, and I felt a slight breeze lift my hair as we stepped into the parking lot. It was like the world was reminding me that no matter how chaotic or cruel the day had been, it would move on, and so would we. In the car, Lily sat in the back seat hugging her bunny tight to her chest, still humming but now with a little more ease. I buckled her in and asked if she wanted her favorite playlist on the drive home, and she nodded without words, her eyes looking a little brighter. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and let the familiar songs fill the space between us. Music always helped her feel grounded, and as the first song played, she began to tap her fingers on her knees in rhythm, the tension slowly easing from her frame. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror and saw her eyes closed, a soft smile returning to her face. It reminded me of all the times she'd used humming or rhythm to navigate situations that would have overwhelmed others completely. She was resilient in a way few people understood. As I drove, my mind kept going back to the confrontation. The anger was still there, simmering below the surface, not just because of Karen but because of how familiar it all was. This wasn't the first time someone had dismissed my daughter's needs, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. I dealt with teachers who thought she was being defiant instead of overstimulated, strangers who glared when she flapped her hands or sang to herself in public, and even extended family members who whispered that maybe she just needed more discipline. And every time it happened, it was like a fresh wound reopening, a reminder of how much of the world still refused to understand or even try. But then there were people like Ellen, like James, like that cashier who smiled without judgment, and I clung to those moments because they gave me hope. When we got home, Lily ran inside and went straight for her favorite beanbag chair in the corner of the living room, curling up with her bunny and grabbing her drawing pad from the nearby shelf. Drawing was another one of her safe zones, a way for her to express things she couldn't put into words. As she scribbled with soft, deliberate strokes, I watched her quietly, marveling at the way she could retreat into her world and find peace there. I started unpacking the groceries, but my mind kept drifting back to the look on her face when Karen had called her a brat, the way her humming had faltered, the doubt in her voice when she asked if she was being bad. That was what hurt the most, not the woman's ignorance or cruelty, but the idea that even for a moment, Lily had questioned herself because of it. I knew I couldn't shield her from every Karen in the world, but I could be her anchor, the one constant in the chaos, the voice that always reassured her she was okay just as she was. I could advocate, educate, and draw lines when needed. I could remind her every day that she didn't need to change to fit the world. The world needed to do better at making room for her. And maybe if enough people like Ellen stood up too, that world would begin to shift, one confrontation, one moment of clarity at a time. As I put away the last of the groceries and made dinner, I glanced at Lily again. She was humming now, not just for comfort but with a rhythm that suggested she was making up a song to go with the picture she was drawing. It was a soft, sweet sound, and it filled the room like sunlight spilling through the windows. It was the sound of resilience, of joy untouched by cruelty, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was proud of her, of how far she'd come, and of how, even after a hard moment, she could still sing. The next morning came quietly, the golden sunlight filtering in through the curtains as I stirred awake, still carrying the weight of yesterday on my shoulders. Even though we'd gone through similar incidents before, this one stuck with me in a different way. Maybe it was the sharpness of Karen's words, or the way Lily had looked at me afterward with that uncertain expression, as if trying to understand why being herself had triggered so much hostility from a stranger. I had always known the world wasn't built to accommodate children like Lily without a fight, but knowing it and being reminded of it so viciously were two very different things. Still, I wasn't going to let one cruel person define the rest of our week. I got up, made Lily's favorite breakfast, banana pancakes with a little smiley face drawn in syrup, and waited for her to wander into the kitchen, sleepy-eyed and bunny in hand. She came in wearing her softest pajamas, the ones with the stars and moons that she insisted on wearing at least twice a week, and as she sat at the table, I saw that her mood had shifted from the anxious quiet of the day before to something brighter. She began humming again, gently and rhythmically, her eyes fixed on the pancakes as she whispered something about the bunny being hungry too. I watched her closely, listening to that familiar tune, and realized she was okay. Not completely unaffected, not immune to what had happened, but healing in her own quiet way. It made me think about how much we could learn from children if we paid attention, not just about autism or differences, but about resilience, about the ability to let hurt pass through you like wind and still find something worth smiling about the next day. After breakfast, I checked my phone and saw a notification from the store. It was a short message from Ellen, thanking me for staying calm during the incident and informing me that Karen had officially been banned from the premises. It felt strange seeing it in writing, so formal and final. Part of me wanted to screenshot the message and post it online to get that validation from strangers that yes, what happened was real, and yes, justice had been served. But the other part of me, the bigger part, knew that what really mattered wasn't some viral moment of internet praise, but the quiet fact that someone had believed us, stood up for us, and took action. That was enough. Later in the day, I decided to take Lily to the park near our neighborhood. She loved the swings, not because she liked going high, but because she enjoyed the gentle motion, the back and forth, the sense of rhythm that soothed her like music did. It was also a place where she could exist without as many rules or expectations, where she could spin or pace or sit in the grass and nobody really noticed or cared. We packed a little picnic, juice boxes, apple slices, and the leftover cookies we'd gotten from the store, and headed out. The sky was clear, the breeze light, and I could tell from the way Lily skipped a little as we walked that today was going to be better. At the park, she went straight to the swings while I laid out the picnic blanket nearby. I watched her as she sat down gently and began to sway, her fingers wrapped tightly around the chains, her eyes closed as she hummed softly to herself. It was a different tune than usual, slower, almost like a lullaby, and I wondered if it was something she was making up on the spot or a melody she'd heard somewhere before and held onto. I didn't ask. I just let her be. That was one of the most important things I'd learned as a parent of an autistic child. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not interrupting, not correcting, but allowing space for them to just exist in their own way. After a while, she jumped off the swing and joined me on the blanket, flopping down with dramatic flair like she was collapsing after a great adventure. She giggled, unwrapped a cookie, and offered a bite to her bunny before taking one herself. I chuckled and played along, pretending to feed the bunny from my apple slice, and she laughed so hard she snorted, which only made her laugh harder. It was one of those moments so pure and unfiltered that it cut through the fog of everything else. The cruelty from yesterday, the lingering sting of Karen's words, all of it felt smaller in the face of that laughter. While we ate, a mother and her 2 young boys passed by, one of the boys staring a little too long at Lily as she made her bunny dance to the beat of her humming. The mother gently nudged him and whispered something to him before giving me a soft smile and continuing on. It wasn't judgment or pity in her eyes, it was understanding. I held her gaze for just a moment and smiled back, grateful for the silent acknowledgement. Not everyone was a Karen. Not everyone reacted with disdain or discomfort. There were people, mothers, fathers, strangers, who got it or at least tried to. On the walk home, Lily asked me a question that took me off guard. "Mom, why did that lady hate my humming?" Her voice was soft, unsure, and she didn't stop walking or look up at me, just kept holding my hand like she didn't want the answer to change anything between us. I took a moment before responding, choosing my words carefully. "She didn't hate your humming, sweetie. She just didn't understand it. Some people see or hear something different and they get scared or angry. It's not right, but it happens. But that doesn't mean what you do is wrong. Your humming makes you feel good, right?" She nodded slowly. "It helps the noise in my head go away." "Then that's what matters," I said. "If something helps you feel safe and calm, then it's a good thing. That lady didn't know you. She didn't know how wonderful and smart and brave you are. And because she didn't understand, she said mean things. But that doesn't make them true." Lily was quiet for a moment, then said, "I don't think I like her." "That's okay," I said with a small laugh. "I don't like her either." She giggled, and just like that, the moment passed. The question that had been sitting heavily on her chest had been released into the air, answered not with scolding or confusion, but with affirmation. I realized then how important it was that I didn't let these incidents harden me, that I kept creating these moments of softness, of clarity, for her to land in when the world tried to push her out. By the time we got home, she was back to her cheerful self, humming and spinning through the front hallway, Bunny swinging wildly in her hand like a little explorer coming back from a grand quest. I watched her, heart full and heavy all at once, and reminded myself that being her parent meant showing up in every one of these moments, good, bad, quiet, loud, with love. And if the world had more people willing to do that, maybe kids like Lily wouldn't have to explain or justify themselves so often. Maybe one day, the humming wouldn't bother anyone at all. The following weekend, as I sat with Lily in the living room while she carefully colored in the pages of her oversized art book, I found myself reflecting on the strange ripple effect that one bad moment in the grocery store had caused. It wasn't just the confrontation, or even the aftermath of dealing with someone like Karen. It was the days that followed, the slow emotional recovery, the quiet questions Lily asked when the memory bubbled up, and the realization that what happened had left a deeper impression than I'd hoped. She hadn't withdrawn or become afraid of going out, but there was a new tentativeness to her, like she was testing the ground under her feet each time she hummed in public, as if unsure whether it was still safe. And that hurt. It hurt more than the insult itself because it meant her joy, her coping mechanism, something so beautifully and harmlessly hers, had been made to feel like a problem. But something else had happened, too, something I didn't expect. The manager, Ellen, called me again a few days later. She said the staff had a meeting about what had happened and were undergoing refresher training on how to handle accessibility issues and confrontations involving customers with disabilities. She thanked me again for how calmly I'd handled things and said that what my daughter went through had helped spark a meaningful conversation among the employees. It was the kind of update that might seem small to someone outside the situation, but to me, it meant the world. Because if that store became even slightly more understanding, even just a little more compassionate, it would mean the next child who hums or stims or spins might not be met with the same hostility. Maybe their parent wouldn't have to grit their teeth and prepare for battle every time they went out in public. Maybe we had made a difference. On Sunday, we returned to that same grocery store, not to prove a point, but because we needed groceries, and it was still the closest and most convenient place to go. I was nervous, though I tried not to let it show. I glanced at Lily in the back seat as we pulled into the lot, and she was happily chatting to her bunny Plush, completely unaware of my tension. Her humming was soft but steady, and I knew she hadn't associated the store with danger the way I had. She was ready to go back because, to her, it was just another day. That gave me strength. Inside, the store felt different, not drastically, but noticeably. Several of the employees we passed smiled and waved. One young woman even crouched to Lily's eye level and said, "I like your bunny," in a voice that was gentle and respectful. Lily beamed and gave a shy thank you before clinging to my side again, her humming unchanged. That brief exchange, so simple and unassuming, brought tears to my eyes, and I had to blink them away as I pushed the cart. People were watching, yes, but not with judgment. There was curiosity, maybe even compassion, and best of all, there was no Karen. No one shushing, no one scowling. Just the quiet, ordinary hum of a grocery store on a Sunday afternoon. As we made our way down the snack aisle, I noticed Ellen walking in our direction. She wasn't dressed in her manager uniform today, just jeans and a sweater, but she recognized us immediately and paused with a smile. I thanked her again for everything she did, and she waved it off, saying, "You helped us more than you know." I've had so many staff members come to me saying they never realized how subtle ableism can be, and now they're more aware. It's made us better. I nodded, too emotional to say much else, and we moved along, Lily selecting her favorite cereal with careful concentration. At the checkout, we were helped by James again, the same employee who'd first stepped in that day. He greeted Lily by name, which surprised me, and offered her a sticker from a small roll behind the counter. She took it and placed it directly on her bunny's ear, which made James laugh. He gave me a quiet look and said, "You're both welcome here anytime." It was the kind of reassurance I didn't even realize I'd been craving. That night, after dinner and bedtime stories, after the soft "good night, mommy," and the final bars of Lily's nighttime humming faded into silence, I sat alone in the kitchen and opened my laptop. I hadn't planned to write about what happened, but the words began to flow like water once I started. I found myself typing the story on a Reddit forum I sometimes visited, one where people shared stories of entitled behavior and the unexpected ways people fought back. I titled the post, "Karen called my daughter a brat in the store, didn't know she was autistic," and I included every detail. The humming, the confrontation, the moment when my daughter asked if she'd been bad, the store manager's response, the ban, the gift card, the kindness afterward. I didn't write it for revenge or internet clout. I wrote it because I wanted people to understand. I wanted them to see what it feels like to be a parent in that situation, to know that the way you respond to a child's difference, especially a child who can't always advocate for themselves, can either lift them up or wound them in ways that linger. I ended the post with a simple thought. Just because you can't see someone's struggles doesn't mean they're not real. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is nothing at all. Just let a child hum in peace. By the next morning, the post had exploded. Hundreds of comments poured in from parents, educators, therapists, and even autistic adults who shared their own experiences, some heartbreaking, some uplifting. People thanked me for standing up. Others admitted they'd been like Karen in the past, frustrated by things they didn't understand, and that the post had changed their perspective. I cried reading some of the responses because it meant that something good had come out of something awful. Awareness was spreading, and for the first time in a long time I felt hopeful. Lily didn't know about the post. She didn't need to. Her world didn't revolve around viral content or comment counts. Her victories were smaller, quieter, and so much more meaningful. Like the fact that the next time we went to the store, she hummed a little louder, or that she no longer asked me if she was being bad afterward. Her hum became a declaration again, not of defiance but of comfort, of self. Of a little girl navigating a loud and often unkind world with a melody all her own. As I closed my laptop that night, I thought about how fragile dignity can be and how easily it's bruised by ignorance. But I also thought about how powerful compassion is when someone chooses to act. Ellen, James, that young cashier who smiled at Lily's bunny, they were proof that good people exist, that empathy can be taught and shared like a flame catching from candle to candle. I turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and let myself breathe a little easier. Because even though the world hadn't changed overnight, it had shifted, ever so slightly, and we had been a part of that. And maybe, just maybe, that meant Lily's melody would echo further than I ever imagined.